Maria Lay had always been the kind of woman people walked past without noticing. She wasn't the type to attract attention or make noise about herself. She worked quietly, lived quietly, and moved through the world in a way that made everyone believe she was just another ordinary person living an ordinary life. And honestly, that was what she wanted. She had spent so many years trying to blend into the background that she had become very good at it. Every morning, she followed the same routine. She woke up at 6, prepared a simple breakfast, usually tea and toast, and listened to a small radio that played soft music. She didn't like loud things, didn't like chaos, didn't like anything that made her feel as though the world expected something from her. After breakfast, she walked to the bus stop, head slightly down, hands tucked into her coat pockets, even in mild weather. She took the same bus, sat in the same seat, and watched the same old buildings pass by. Her life was calm, predictable, almost too quiet for most people. But for her, it was safe. Maria worked as an office assistant at a small printing company. Her job involved answering phones, sending emails, organizing documents, and making sure the break room had enough coffee. She did her work without complaint, always gentle, always polite. People liked her, but they didn't really know her. They greeted her every day, talked about the weather with her, and sometimes asked her to join lunch, but no one knew anything deeper. It wasn't that she didn't want friends. She simply kept a distance, a quiet space that no one dared cross because she never let them. Most people thought she was shy, or maybe just boring. No one imagined she had a life before this one filled with bright lights, applause, and music so powerful it could make hearts tremble. If someone had told her coworkers that Maria was once called the most promising young pianist in the country, they would have laughed and shaken their heads. It didn't match the image of the woman who carefully stapled papers and apologized when someone bumped into her. But the truth was there, hidden deep. Maria had once lived a different life, one she never talked about. When she was a child, she had been known as a musical miracle. She had learned piano before she could read. At 7, she performed pieces adults struggled with. At 10, she won competitions. At 12, she played on stages with velvet curtains and bright lights, wearing little gowns her mother ironed carefully the night before. The audience clapped for her, smiled at her, wrote about her in small newspapers. Her life had once been full of sound that felt like it belonged to her soul. Then, everything changed. Not suddenly, not in one day, but slowly, like a candle burning down. A passing storm, a hospital room, quiet sobbing, and then silence so heavy it felt like the world was pressing down on her. The day her mother passed away, the music inside Maria stopped. Or maybe she forced it to stop. Maybe she was afraid that touching the piano again would break her heart open in a way she couldn't fix. So she quit. She didn't talk about it. She simply walked away from everything she had worked for, everything she had loved. Her father didn't argue. He was hurting too, and he didn't have the strength to push her. Years passed. She grew older, finished school, moved into a small apartment, and built a new life, one far from music halls, one where no one recognized her or expected greatness. Some people run away from danger. Maria had run away from her own brilliance. And for a long time, she convinced herself it was the right choice. But music has a strange way of staying alive, even when you bury it. Sometimes she would hear a piano playing from a neighbor's window, and her heart would tighten. Sometimes she would see a street performer tapping delicate notes on a small keyboard, and her fingers would twitch as if remembering old habits. Sometimes she dreamed of the piano, her mother standing behind her, gently touching her shoulder after a performance, whispering, "You are wonderful." When she woke up, she would push the memories away and tell herself it was just a dream. Her niece, Lily, was the only child who sometimes brought music into her life. Lily was 10, bright, cheerful, and full of curiosity. She loved singing, dancing, and playing simple tunes on a small keyboard Maria had bought her for her birthday. Whenever Lily visited Maria's apartment, she would ask, "Aunt Maria, can you show me how to play something?" And Maria would smile, shake her head lightly, and say, "You're doing very well on your own. Just keep practicing." She never sat at the keyboard. She never touched a key. One Saturday afternoon, everything began to change. Maria's sister called and asked if she could take Lily to her music class because she was stuck at work. Maria agreed. She loved spending time with Lily. They walked together to the music academy, a colorful building with posters of smiling kids holding violins and pianos. Children ran around the lobby, some carrying cases, some chatting loudly about songs they were learning. Parents sat on benches, scrolling through their phones or reading schedules. Maria felt slightly uncomfortable. Music schools made her tense, not because they were noisy, but because they carried a certain energy, a mix of excitement, pressure, and memories she had tried so hard to forget. Lily tugged her hand. "Come inside with me, Aunt Maria. You can watch." Maria shook her head gently. "I'll wait in the lobby," but Lily insisted. "Please? It's just a short class." Maria finally gave in. She followed her niece into a room with bright lights and rows of small keyboards. A woman in her 50s, with a sharp posture and neat clothing, walked up to them. "You must be Lily's aunt," she said. Her tone was polite but firm. "We're starting soon. Are you sitting in?" Maria nodded softly. "Just watching." The teacher, Miss Crane, gave her a short smile and turned back to the children. The class soon began. Kids played simple notes, and Miss Crane corrected their fingers, guiding them with strict but caring instructions. Maria watched silently from the back, trying to relax, but something in her chest tightened with every key pressed. It wasn't pain. It was more like a reminder of something she had once known deeply. Halfway through the class, Miss Crane turned to the adults at the back. "We're encouraging family involvement today. Anyone who wants to try a short exercise is welcome." Maria immediately shook her head. Another parent stepped forward and played a few notes, causing the children to giggle. Then another parent tried. Soon, all parents except Maria had participated. Miss Crane glanced at her. "Would you like to try, dear? Just a few simple notes." Maria raised her hands slightly. "Oh no, I'm fine. I don't play." Miss Crane misread her hesitation as embarrassment. "Don't worry. It's just for fun. The children love seeing adults make mistakes." A few parents laughed. Lily looked up, eyes bright. "Aunt Maria, please? Just one time?" Maria felt a gentle push, not from the teacher, not from the parents, but from Lily's hopeful expression. She couldn't say no to that face. So she stood up, stiff and unsure, and walked to an empty keyboard. She sat down slowly, afraid her fingers might betray her. Miss Crane handed her a simple sheet with basic notes. "Just press these keys," she said kindly. "It doesn't need to be perfect." Maria nodded. She lowered her hands and placed her fingers on the keys. She told herself she would play stiffly, awkwardly. She told herself she would pretend she had no idea what she was doing. But something happened in the split second her fingers touched the keys. Feeling shot through her hand warm. Familiar, almost like electricity. She froze. It had been years since she touched a piano, but her body remembered. Her hand felt like it had been waiting. She pressed the first key lightly. A soft note rang out. It was simple, nothing special, but her heart skipped. She pressed another, and another. Her fingers wanted to move faster, glide, dance. She stopped them. She forced them to obey her. She was terrified she would accidentally reveal everything. She completed the small exercise without mistakes, though her movements were stiff on purpose. The children clapped politely, thinking nothing special on it. Miss Crane nodded approvingly. "Good job," she said. "See? Not so hard." Maria smiled weakly and returned to her seat. Her heart was pounding so loudly, it felt like the entire room could hear it. She stared at her hands, almost afraid of them. She had promised herself never to touch a piano again. She had promised herself that music was part of a past life she had buried. But now, sitting in that bright room with children laughing and talking, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. The music inside her wasn't gone. It had only been sleeping, and that tiny moment a simple classroom exercise she tried so hard to perform poorly was enough to wake it again. Even if no one else noticed, but someone did notice. Young assistant teacher stepped out of the hallway just as Maria finished playing. She didn't hear the whole thing, but she noticed the way Maria's hand moved, the slight hesitation, the quiet control in her fingers. She narrowed her eyes slightly, curious. Something felt off. Something felt familiar. Maria didn't realize it then, but the quiet life she had built over the years was about to shift. Not quickly, not dramatically, but gently, piece by piece, pulling her back toward a world she thought she had escaped. For now. Though, she sat back down, breathed deeply, and tried to calm the storm building inside her chest. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know how deeply this small moment would lead her back into a life full of sound. But the first spark had already been lit, and sparks, even the smallest ones, always find a way to burn through the dark. Maria woke up the next morning feeling oddly unsettled. She couldn't point to one exact reason. Nothing bad had happened. No one had said anything hurtful. But something inside her felt different, like a small thread had been pulled loose, and now the rest of the fabric was slowly beginning to shift. She sat up in bed, rubbed her eyes, and tried to quiet her thoughts. But her mind kept drifting back to the moment her fingers touched the keys in Lily's music class. It had been such a simple thing, just a small classroom exercise. She had tried her best to play stiffly, to act like she didn't know what she was doing, but she remembered the feeling too clearly. The warmth of the keys, the familiar weight under her fingertips, the way her heart raced for reasons she didn't fully understand. It had been years, too many to count sometimes, since she had played anything more than a single note. And yet, in that moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. She shook her head firmly. "It doesn't matter," she whispered to herself. She forced her breathing to steady, the way she always did when old memories tried to come back. It was just one moment, nothing more. Still, the thought lingered as she made breakfast. Her hands trembled slightly when she buttered her toast. She tried not to notice. She tried not to think about the way her body had responded on its own. As if she had been asleep for years, and someone finally nudged her awake by the time she arrived at work. She had convinced herself that she was being dramatic. It was just nostalgia, nothing more. Old memories trying to claw their way back. She wouldn't let them. She had built a quiet life, a peaceful one, and she wasn't going to let a single moment in a music classroom undo all of that. But the day didn't feel normal, even the office. Normally, a dull and predictable place felt slightly off. People passed her desk and greeted her in their usual way, but every sound seemed sharper than usual. The ringing of the phone, the tapping of keyboards, the hum of the printer. She tried to drown it out, but her mind kept drifting at one point. During her lunch break, she found herself tapping her fingers on the table without realizing it. A simple rhythm. Something she used to do when she was thinking through a musical passage. She gasped softly and pulled her hand back, almost as if the table had burned her. She glanced around the break room, but no one was watching. She sighed deeply. "I need to forget about yesterday," she whispered. But she knew it wasn't that easy. Later that afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from her sister Dot. "Thank you again for taking Lily to her class yesterday. She told me you played something." She was very excited. Maria stared at the message for a long minute. Her mouth felt dry. She typed a short reply, "It was nothing," and put her phone away. But she knew it hadn't been nothing. That same afternoon, when she went to pick up some groceries before going home, she passed by the music academy again. She hadn't meant to. It was just the path she usually took, but this time the building made her stop in her tracks. She stared at it from across the sidewalk, her heart beating a little too fast. The windows were glowing with warm light, and she could hear faint notes drifting out whenever the door opened. Simple notes. Probably children practicing. But even those soft sounds made her chest ache. She wasn't sure how long she stood there, watching the doors open and close, watching kids walk in with small keyboards or violin cases. She should have looked away. She should have moved on. Instead, she found herself listening. She stepped closer only to hear a piano scale being practiced inside, slow, uneven, the way beginners often played. And yet it pulled at her. Something deep inside her responded in a way she wasn't prepared for. Just then, the young assistant teacher she had noticed the day before stepped out of the building. She carried a stack of music sheets against her chest. She saw Maria standing near the door and paused for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if trying to place her face. Maria quickly looked away and hurried down the sidewalk. She didn't want anyone from the academy to talk to her. She didn't want to risk getting pulled into anything. All she wanted was to forget the whole thing. But on the walk home, her thoughts refused to settle. She tried to distract herself by focusing on ordinary things, the uneven pavement beneath her shoes, the faint smell of roasted peanuts from a street vendor, the sound of a dog barking behind a fence. But every little sound seemed to echo through her mind, mixing with memories she didn't want to remember. When she finally reached her apartment, she leaned against the door after closing it, letting out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She placed her groceries on the counter and sat at the dining table, feeling exhausted even though the day had been ordinary. Except at WASN single quotes T, that something had shifted. Later in the evening, her niece called her through video chat. Lily's bright face filled the screen, smiling widely. "Aunt Maria, are you busy?" "No, sweetheart," Maria said gently, returning the smile. "How was your day?" "It was good. Yesterday was the best, though. My teacher said you were brave for trying the exercise." Maria's stomach tightened. "Brave? I don't think so." "She said most grown-ups are scared to even touch the keyboard," Lily said proudly. "But you tried, and you didn't mess up at all." Maria swallowed. "It was just simple notes." "But you did it perfectly," Lily insisted. "Can you show me more next time?" Maria's heart skipped. She forced a soft smile. "I don't know, Lily. Please, please?" The little girl begged, eyes sparkling. Maria hesitated. "We'll see, okay?" Lily nodded happily, satisfied with that answer. After the call ended, Maria placed her phone face down on the table and stared at the blank wall. Her heart felt heavy, confused, unsettled. She didn't want this. She didn't want music creeping its way back into her life. She had buried it for a reason. She had built a life where no one expected anything from her. A life where she didn't have to feel the pressure, the weight, the memories. But now it felt like the universe was pushing her gently, little by little, toward something she wasn't ready for. Maybe she never would be ready. That night, she tried to sleep early, but her mind refused to quiet. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw a piano. Her fingers twitched against the blanket. She could almost hear her mother's voice, soft, warm, encouraging, telling her to trust the music. She pulled the blanket over her head and whispered, "Stop." She didn't want those memories. Not now, not ever. Yet they kept coming. And then came the dream Dot in the dream. She stood on a grand stage again. The curtains were deep red, the lights dazzling. The audience was silent, waiting. She sat at a beautiful grand piano, her fingers poised above the keys. She felt calm, confident, at peace. When she played the first note, the sound echoed through the hall, filling her with warmth she hadn't felt in years. But then the dream began to blur. The lights dimmed. The stage darkened. The piano keys faded into shadows. She called out, but no sound came. And then she heard a soft voice, her mother's, whispering her name. A moment later, Maria jolted awake, breathing hard. She sat up and pressed a hand to her chest. Her heart was pounding wildly. She wiped her eyes, though she wasn't sure if she had cried. She looked around the room, trying to convince herself she was safe. It was just a dream, just a memory. Nothing more, Dot, but the dream stayed with her long after she woke up. It followed her through breakfast the next morning. It followed her to the bus stop. It followed her to work. She tried to ignore it, but part of her knew the truth. She could pretend all she wanted, but music had always been a part of her. Even when she shoved it deep inside, even when she walked away from it, it never disappeared. It waited, Dot, and now, after one accidental moment in a small classroom, the part of her she had locked away was starting to wake up. The next day, something unexpected happened, Dot. As she was packing her bag to leave work, her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Hello?" A gentle voice replied, "Hello. Is this Maria Lee?" "Yes. Who is this?" "This is the assistant instructor from the music academy. I believe we saw each other briefly yesterday." Maria froze. "We wanted to invite you to an adult beginner workshop this weekend," the woman said. "We're trying to encourage family involvement and community participation. Your niece spoke very highly of you." Maria's mouth went dry. "Oh, that's kind, but I don't think it's free," the instructor added gently. "And very relaxed. No pressure at all. Just something fun to try." Maria's throat tightened. I appreciate the offer, but I don't know if I should." "No worries," the instructor said kindly. "Take your time. If you decide to join, just let us know." The call ended. Maria stood frozen in place long after the line went silent. She knew she should forget about it. She knew she should walk away, but deep down, a small voice whispered something she didn't want to hear. Maybe it's time. She closed her eyes, Dot, and for the first time in many years, she didn't push the voice away. Maria didn't sleep much after she received the call from the music academy. Her mind kept circling the same thoughts, like a small bird trapped inside a room with no open windows. She kept telling herself she wasn't going to that workshop. She had no reason to go. She had pushed music out of her life a long time ago, and she had survived without it. She didn't need it. She didn't want it. But every time she thought that, something inside her softened, almost like a quiet sigh she couldn't shut out. The next morning, she tried to drown herself in her routine. She made the same breakfast, took the same bus, greeted the same people at work. But even with all her effort, her day felt heavier than usual. Her mind kept drifting, bouncing between memories and possibilities she didn't want to explore. Dot, at one point, while she was filing documents, she accidentally hummed a tune she hadn't heard in years. It was a soft, simple melody, something her mother used to hum when she combed Maria's hair. As soon as she realized what she was doing, she stopped abruptly and glanced around to see if anyone noticed. Thankfully, no one did, but she noticed, and that bothered her more than she cared to admit. She worked through the day, smiling politely at coworkers who didn't know anything about the storm inside her. She wanted to talk to someone, maybe her sister, but she knew what would happen if she did. Her sister would get excited. She would encourage her to go back to music. She would talk about second chances and hidden talents, and Maria didn't want those words. She wanted silence. She wanted peace, but she wasn't finding any dot by the time she left work. She felt exhausted, not physically, but mentally. She walked home at a slow pace, hoping the fresh air would help clear her thoughts. It didn't. If anything, the quiet streets only made her thoughts louder. When she reached her apartment building, she saw her elderly neighbor sitting on the front steps. He waved at her with a bright smile. "Evening, Maria." She returned the smile gently. "Good evening. You look tired," he said kindly. "Long day?" She hesitated for a moment. "Just a lot on my mind," she said softly. "Thinking too much is never good," he said with a chuckle. "Life is easier when you follow your heart instead of your head." Maria forced a small smile. If only it were that simple. She went upstairs, made herself a cup of tea, and tried to distract herself by watching a show on her old TV, but nothing could hold her attention. Her mind kept drifting back to one thing, the workshop. She imagined herself sitting in a room full of adults who probably knew nothing about music. She would blend in easily. No one would expect anything from her. No one would know who she once was. Maybe she could just sit quietly in the back and pretend she was learning for the first time. Maybe it would be harmless, or maybe it would be dangerous. Dangerous because even a small taste of her old world might bring everything rushing back. The memories, the pressure, the expectations, the pain she buried, but also the joy. At one point, she caught herself staring at her hands again. They were resting in her lap, still, calm, almost too calm. She flexed her fingers slowly, watching them move with a grace she didn't practice anymore. They moved as if they remembered something she didn't want them to. That scared her. She stood up quickly, walked to the kitchen sink, and splashed cold water on her face. "Stop thinking about it," she whispered. "It doesn't matter." But even she knew she was lying. The next 2 days passed painfully slow. She went to work, did her job, came home, repeated her routine. But her thoughts kept circling the same place. It felt like her mind was gently tugging her back towards something she had tried to lock away. On Thursday evening, her sister called. "Lily won't stop talking about you playing in her class," she said with a laugh. "You made quite an impression." Maria tried to smile. "She's exaggerating." "No, she's not. You should have seen her face. She thinks you're amazing." Maria's heart ached. She didn't want to disappoint her niece. "I'm glad she had fun. She said the academy invited you to a workshop. Are you going?" "I don't know." "You should," her sister said warmly. "It might be good for you." Maria felt her throat tighten. "I'm not sure." But her sister didn't push further. "Whatever you choose, I'm proud of you." Those words stayed with her long after the call ended. On Friday night, Maria lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She couldn't sleep, not with her mind spinning like a wheel that refused to stop. Eventually, she sat up, turned on her bedside lamp, and pulled out an old suitcase from the back of her closet. Inside, it was a small box wrapped in worn paper. She hadn't opened it in years. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside were small pieces of her childhood. Old sheet music, programs from her performances, photographs of her on stage. At the very bottom was a picture of her mother adjusting the ribbon in her hair before a concert. Maria touched the edge of the photograph, gently, her eyes softening. "I miss you," she whispered. A tear rolled down her cheek. She wiped it quickly. She looked down at her hands again, but this time she felt something different. Not fear, Not confusion. Something small. Something warm. Hope. It scared her almost as much as the fear did. She put the box away and closed her eyes, trying to breathe normally. She wasn't sure if she had the courage to go to the workshop. She wasn't sure if she could face music again. But she knew the truth now. She wanted to try. She didn't want to admit it out loud, not even to herself. But deep down, the part of her she had buried wasn't gone. It was waiting, and she was tired of running. The morning of the workshop arrived too quickly. Maria woke up before her alarm, her stomach turning with nerves. For a moment, she almost convinced herself to stay home. She could pretend she overslept. She could pretend she forgot. No one would know. But then she thought of Lily's excited face, her sister's proud voice, the old photo of her mother. So she got dressed. She chose simple clothes, nothing that would draw attention. She tied her hair back neatly, took a deep breath, and stepped outside. The morning air was cool, fresh, almost calming. She walked slowly toward the music academy, her heart pounding with each step. Every part of her wanted to turn back, but she kept moving, even as her hands shook. When she reached the academy, she stopped at the entrance. She could hear faint sounds of piano scales drifting from inside. She swallowed hard. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. And then she stepped inside. The lobby was busy, filled with adults signing in, chatting lightly, laughing nervously. A staff member greeted her with a warm smile. "Hello. Are you here for the workshop?" Maria nodded slowly. "Great. Please sign your name here." Her hand trembled slightly as she wrote her name on the sheet. "Room 4 is where the beginners meet. You can head there whenever you're ready." Maria thanked her quietly and made her way down the hallway. As she walked, she saw children practicing through open doors. The sight brought a strange mixture of comfort and pain. When she reached room 4, she hesitated outside the door. She could hear people talking inside. She felt her heart pounding too fast, but she took a deep breath, placed her hand on the door handle, and pushed it open. The room was bright and welcoming. Adults sat at small keyboards arranged in neat rows. The instructor at the front turned and smiled warmly. "You must be Maria," she said gently. Maria blinked in surprise. "Yes. How did you know?" "Your niece spoke very fondly of you." Maria felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. "Please, find any seat you like," the instructor said. Maria chose one near the back, hoping to blend in. She placed her hands in her lap, trying to calm herself. The instructor began talking about the basics of piano, explaining things Maria had learned long before these people even knew what a scale was. She listened quietly, pretending she was learning something new. The other adults laughed at their mistakes, asked simple questions, and tried to follow instructions. The atmosphere was light and friendly, but Maria felt strange. She couldn't stop her eyes from drifting to her own keyboard. She stared at the keys, feeling a mix of fear and longing. When the instructor asked everyone to try a simple exercise, Maria hesitated. She wanted to play. She didn't want to play. Her heart pulled in both directions at once. Finally, she placed her fingers on the keys. Her hands trembled slightly, but the moment she pressed the first note, something deep inside her shifted. The sound echoed softly. Familiar, warm, alive. She played slowly, carefully, trying not to reveal too much. But even in her caution, her touch was smoother than the others. Her movements were more natural. She felt the music again, not fully, but enough to make her breath hitch. The instructor paused mid-sentence and looked toward her. Not in surprise, not in suspicion, but with curiosity. Maria quickly lowered her gaze and pretended she had made a mistake. She fumbled with a key on purpose, hoping to draw attention away from herself. The instructor only smiled and continued. The rest of the workshop passed in a blur. Maria played softly, quietly, trying to hide how much she wanted to keep going. She felt her old self tugging at her heart, reminding her of who she used to be. After the workshop ended, the instructor approached her. "You did very well today," she said warmly. Maria forced a shy smile. "I just followed what you taught." The instructor nodded thoughtfully. "I hope you'll come again next week." Maria hesitated. She didn't know if she was ready for that. She didn't know if she had the courage. But then she heard her own voice say, softly, "Maybe." As she walked out of the academy, the late afternoon sun warmed her. The next morning felt strangely heavy for Maria, as if the air itself knew that something inside her was shifting. She woke earlier than usual and lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Her mind kept replaying the moment her fingers landed on the wrong key. It wasn't the mistake that bothered her. It was the fear she had seen flash across her own face in the window reflection. A fear she had thought she buried years ago. Still, she got up, made tea, and dressed for work like always. She reached the bus stop a little early and watched cars roll past, each humming like distant thoughts. She tried to shake away the memory of the room filled with teenagers staring at her, of the teacher calling her out, of the pressure bubbling under her skin. But no matter how much she tried to let it go, it lingered. When she reached the school building later that afternoon, she felt something new, hesitation, the kind that made her feet feel heavy. But she reminded herself that she wasn't there as a performer. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was just helping. That thought calmed her enough to walk in. The music teacher greeted her with a cheerful smile, as though the previous day had never happened. The students were already seated, some chatting, some yawning, some tapping their pencils on their desks. The room felt warmer somehow, not as tense, not as intimidating. Yet Maria could sense a strange curiosity in the students' eyes. They looked at her the way people look at something unusual and sure, but interested. The teacher clapped his hands and asked everyone to settle down. "All right," he said. "Yesterday we worked on the beginning of the piece. Today we move forward." He motioned toward the bench again. "Would you mind?" Maria took a slow breath and stepped forward. This time, when she sat at the piano, she placed her hands gently on her lap first. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She let herself feel the keys' cool surface before she touched them. It wasn't confidence, it was acceptance. She already knew she wasn't walking away from the piano again. When she pressed the first chord, it sounded steadier than before. Not perfect, not strong, but real. The students leaned in slightly, noticing the difference. The teacher raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Maria started playing the next section, and something inside her began to loosen. The melody felt familiar, even though she hadn't practiced it in years. She didn't think too much. She didn't worry about mistakes. She let her hands move naturally. The music came out soft at first, then clearer, almost like a voice finding its tone. Halfway through, she missed a note again, but this time she didn't freeze. She simply kept going. The teacher gave a small approving nod. When she finished, the room stayed quiet for a moment. Not the awkward silence from yesterday. This one felt thoughtful. Then a girl in the front row raised her hand. "Can you play that part again?" she asked. Maria blinked. "Which part?" "The one in the middle," the girl said. "It sounded really pretty, but I didn't understand how you moved your left hand." Other students nodded. Some leaned forward, their curiosity genuine now, not judgmental. The teacher smiled softly. "Why don't you show them slowly?" "Just the left hand." Maria's heart thumped once, hard. She had not explained music to anyone in years. But the girl was watching her with such open interest that saying no felt wrong. So she turned slightly in her seat and began to play just the left-hand section. Slower, breaking down each movement. The students watched with surprising attention. One boy even mouthed the rhythm to himself. Another made small notes in his notebook. For the first time since she stepped foot into the school, Maria felt something warm growing in her chest. Not pride, not fear. Something gentler. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel around music for a long time. Connection. After class ended, a few students lingered around her. They weren't asking about who she used to be, or why she played so quietly, or why she didn't look like a typical performer. They asked real questions. How do you make the soft parts sound soft without losing control? How do you keep the rhythm steady when the notes change fast? Do you get nervous when you play? Maria answered each question as simply as she could. She didn't pretend to be someone else. She didn't use difficult words. She explained the way she learned, by feeling, by listening, by understanding the story behind each piece. Her voice trembled at first, but the students didn't seem bothered by it. And one of them said something she didn't expect. You should play more. You're really good. Maria stared at the girl who said it. She didn't know how to respond, because the words didn't feel like praise. They felt like truth, spoken without any intention to flatter. And that made them harder to accept. When the room finally emptied, the teacher approached her slowly, as if he sensed she was still processing everything. He rested one hand on the edge of the piano. You played beautifully today, he said. You're getting more comfortable. Maria shook her head. I just didn't think too much. That helped. That's exactly my point, he replied with a small laugh. Music is not about perfection. It's about letting yourself breathe through the notes. She didn't answer. She didn't know what to say. The teacher hesitated, then added softly, You know, I meant it when I said you have something special. Whether you believe it or not, the students feel it too. They sensed it today. Maria pressed her lips together, unsure. Compliments made her uncomfortable. They brought back memories she wasn't ready to face. Applause, spotlights, her mother smiling in the front row. The memory hit her unexpectedly, and she felt her throat tighten. She looked away, pretending to adjust the piano sheet. The teacher noticed, but didn't push. Take your time, he said gently. You don't have to explain anything. When Maria finally walked out of the building, the sky had turned a soft orange. Sunset light painted the pavement gold. She walked slowly, trying to understand the strange feeling inside her, like a door she had locked long ago was cracking open from the inside. Her bus arrived later than usual, giving her time to sit at the stop and breathe. She looked at her hands, the same hands she had once tried to hide from music. They felt different now, not lighter, not heavier, just alive. She reached home, made tea, and sat by the window. The city hummed in the distance, and for the first time in years, she felt the faint pull of something old, something she thought had died with her mother. Not hope, not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind. Just a small, warm ember glowing quietly inside her chest. She didn't know what it meant yet. She didn't know what would happen tomorrow. She only knew one thing. She wanted to play again, not because someone forced her, not because she needed to prove anything, but because, after all this time, the music inside her was whispering again, asking gently to come back to life. And for the first time, she was willing to listen. Maria woke up the next day with a feeling she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't excitement, not exactly. It was more like a gentle pull, something urging her forward instead of holding her back. She sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, letting the morning light warm her face. Her apartment was quiet as always, but the quiet didn't feel heavy this time. It felt open. She made tea and sat by the window, listening to the soft hum of the city waking up. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like the world was rushing past her. She didn't feel like she was hiding from anything. She simply existed, and it was enough. But beneath this calmness, something else was growing: an idea, a question, a possibility. She tried to push it away, but it kept returning. What if she allowed herself to play again, really play, not just demonstrate simple pieces for a classroom? The thought scared her. It also warmed her. She didn't know what to do with it, yet at work, her coworkers noticed she seemed different. They couldn't name what it was, but something in her expression had shifted. She smiled more easily. She looked less tense, less guarded. One coworker even asked if she had won a lottery ticket or something. Maria just laughed softly and said no. After work, she walked to the school again, her steps lighter than usual. The hallway felt familiar now, not intimidating. The music room door was open, and she could hear students talking and laughing inside. The sound didn't make her nervous the way it used to. Instead, it felt warm, like a place she was slowly growing comfortable in. When she entered, a few students waved at her. One even said, "You're back," in a cheerful tone that surprised her. The teacher gave her a friendly nod, and the whole room seemed to brighten in a way she didn't expect. "Ready for today?" the teacher asked gently. Maria hesitated. She wasn't sure what ready meant anymore. But she nodded anyway. The class began, and the students took turns practicing. Some did well, some struggled, and some made the same mistakes they had made the last 2 days. But instead of feeling pressure, Maria found herself watching with interest. She found herself understanding their challenges, remembering her own early days, learning to shape the sound she wanted. Then, near the end of the lesson, something unexpected happened. A student raised a hand and said, "Can she play again?" "Like yesterday?" Several others agreed, some quietly, some eagerly. Maria felt heat crawl up her neck. She wasn't used to being approached like this. She wasn't used to anyone wanting to hear her play. But the students' faces were open and hopeful, without any trace of judgment. The teacher glanced at her. "Only if you're comfortable," he said. She wasn't, not fully. But at the same time, she wanted to. She wanted to feel the keys again. She wanted to see if the small spark inside her would grow. So she sat down at the bench. Her hands rested above the keys, trembling slightly, but not from fear, more from anticipation. She took a breath and let her fingers move. The melody flowed out gently at first, then stronger, more sure. She didn't play a difficult piece. She played something simple, something personal, something she hadn't touched in years. It was a tune she remembered from childhood, something her mother used to hum while doing chores. The memory of that soft humming floated into the room with each note, filling the space with warmth. The students grew still. Even the teacher leaned back, as though not wanting to disturb the moment. Maria didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't try to be perfect. She simply let the memory guide her hands. When she finished, the room stayed quiet, not the heavy silence of doubt, but the peaceful kind that follows something meaningful. And one student whispered, "That was beautiful." Another said, "It felt different." Maria swallowed. Her throat felt tight again, but not from sadness. It was something else, something she didn't have a name for. The teacher walked closer and spoke softly. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Maria shook her head. "I just used to practice a lot." There was so much she wasn't ready to say. Her mother's lessons, the competitions, the pressure, the loss. She wasn't ready to open all that. Not yet. But for the first time, she didn't feel the need to hide everything. She didn't feel like she would crumble if someone saw a piece of her past. After class, the students gathered around her again, asking questions, laughing, showing her small mistakes in their sheet music. Their energy wasn't overwhelming anymore. It was comforting. Their curiosity wasn't sharp or intrusive, was warmed out as the room slowly emptied. The teacher approached her with a thoughtful look. "You know, he said. The school is hosting a small recital next month. It's not a big event, just students and their families. But it could be a nice experience for them to see someone play with real emotion. Someone who understands music the way you do. Maria's heart skipped a beat. Me? No, no. I don't perform anymore. He raised his hands gently. I'm not asking you to. Not unless you want to. But maybe it could be a way to reconnect with the part of you you've been avoiding. She didn't know what to say. The thought of performing even for a small group made her nervous. But it didn't terrify her the way it once did. The teacher continued softly. You don't have to decide now. Just think about it. Maria nodded, though she wasn't sure she wanted to. She walked home slowly that evening, her mind buzzing with possibilities she didn't feel ready for. The city lights reflected on the pavement, and she watched them blur beneath her steps. When she reached her apartment, she sat on the floor, tired but strangely awake inside. She looked at her hands again. Hands that had once played on stages. Hands that had once trembled with fear. Hands that had now begun to find music again. For the first time in many years, she whispered to herself, "What if I tried?" The words felt strange but powerful. They echoed in her small apartment, soft but steady. She didn't know what trying meant yet. Practicing? Performing? Allowing herself to remember her mother's voice? Allowing herself to feel proud again? She didn't know. But she knew this. The music inside her wasn't silent anymore. It was waiting. It was patient. And it was calling her forward. One small step at a time, Maria wrapped her arms around her knees and let out a quiet breath. She wasn't ready for big decisions, but she was ready for small steps. And maybe that was enough for now. Tomorrow, she would show up again. She would play again. She would keep moving, even if she didn't know where it would lead. For the first time in years, she felt like her life wasn't just something she watched happen. She felt part of it. She felt alive within it. And somewhere deep inside her, the quiet spark of music grew a little brighter. Maria woke up the next day with a feeling she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't excitement, not exactly. It was more like a gentle pull, something urging her forward instead of holding her back. She sat on the edge of her bed for a moment, letting the morning light warm her face. Her apartment was quiet as always, but the quiet didn't feel heavy this time. It felt open. She made tea and sat by the window, listening to the soft hum of the city waking up. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like the world was rushing past her. She didn't feel like she was hiding from anything. She simply existed, and it was enough. But beneath this calmness, something else was growing, an idea, a question, a possibility. She tried to push it away, but it kept returning. What if she allowed herself to play again, really play, not just demonstrate simple pieces for a classroom? The thought scared her. It also warmed her. She didn't know what to do with it, yet at work, her coworkers noticed she seemed different. They couldn't name what it was, but something in her expression had shifted. She smiled more easily. She looked less tense, less guarded. One coworker even asked if she had won a lottery ticket or something. Maria just laughed softly and said no. After work, she walked to the school again, her steps lighter than usual. The hallway felt familiar now, not intimidating. The music room door was open, and she could hear students talking and laughing inside. The sound didn't make her nervous the way it used to. Instead, it felt warm, like a place she was slowly growing comfortable in. When she entered, a few students waved at her. One even said, "You're back," in a cheerful tone that surprised her. The teacher gave her a friendly nod, and the whole room seemed to brighten in a way she didn't expect. "Ready for today?" the teacher asked gently. Maria hesitated. She wasn't sure what ready meant anymore. But she nodded anyway. The class began, and the students took turns practicing. Some did well, some struggled, and some made the same mistakes they had made the last 2 days. But instead of feeling pressure, Maria found herself watching with interest. She found herself understanding their challenges, remembering her own early days, learning to shape the sound she wanted. Then, near the end of the lesson, something unexpected happened. A student raised a hand and said, "Can she play again?" "Like yesterday?" Several others agreed, some quietly, some eagerly. Maria felt heat crawl up her neck. She wasn't used to being approached like this. She wasn't used to anyone wanting to hear her play. But the students' faces were open and hopeful, without any trace of judgment. The teacher glanced at her. "Only if you're comfortable," he said. She wasn't, not fully. But at the same time, she wanted to. She wanted to feel the keys again. She wanted to see if the small spark inside her would grow. So she sat down at the bench. Her hands rested above the keys, trembling slightly, but not from fear, more from anticipation. She took a breath and let her fingers move. The melody flowed out gently at first, then stronger, more sure. She didn't play a difficult piece. She played something simple, something personal, something she hadn't touched in years. It was a tune she remembered from childhood, something her mother used to hum while doing chores. The memory of that soft humming floated into the room with each note, filling the space with warmth. The students grew still. Even the teacher leaned back, as though not wanting to disturb the moment. Maria didn't try to impress anyone. She didn't try to be perfect. She simply let the memory guide her hands. When she finished, the room stayed quiet, not the heavy silence of doubt, but the peaceful kind that follows something meaningful. And one student whispered, "That was beautiful." Another said, "It felt different." Maria swallowed. Her throat felt tight again, but not from sadness. It was something else, something she didn't have a name for. The teacher walked closer and spoke softly. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Maria shook her head. "I just used to practice a lot." There was so much she wasn't ready to say. Her mother's lessons, the competitions, the pressure, the loss. She wasn't ready to open all that. Not yet. But for the first time, she didn't feel the need to hide everything. She didn't feel like she would crumble if someone saw a piece of her past. After class, the students gathered around her again, asking questions, laughing, showing her small mistakes in their sheet music. Their energy wasn't overwhelming anymore. It was comforting. Their curiosity wasn't sharp or intrusive, was warmed out as the room slowly emptied. The teacher approached her with a thoughtful look. "You know," he said, "the school is hosting a small recital next month. It's not a big event, just students and their families. But it could be a nice experience for them to see someone play with real emotion. Someone who understands music the way you do." Maria's heart skipped a beat. "Me? No. I don't perform anymore." He raised his hands gently. "I'm not asking you to. Not unless you want to. But maybe it could be a way to reconnect with the part of you you've been avoiding." She didn't know what to say. The thought of performing even for a small group made her nervous. But it didn't terrify her the way it once did. The teacher continued softly, "You don't have to decide now. Just think about it." Maria nodded, though she wasn't sure she wanted to. She walked home slowly that evening, her mind buzzing with possibilities she didn't feel ready for. The city lights reflected on the pavement, and she watched them blur beneath her steps. When she reached her apartment, she sat on the floor, tired but strangely awake inside. She looked at her hands again, hands that had once played on stages, hands that had once trembled with fear, hands that had now begun to find music again. For the first time in many years, she whispered to herself, "What if I tried?" The words felt strange but powerful. They echoed in her small apartment, soft but steady. She didn't know what trying meant yet. Practicing? Performing? Allowing herself to remember her mother's voice? Allowing herself to feel proud again? She didn't know, but she knew this. The music inside her wasn't silent anymore. It was waiting. It was patient. And it was calling her forward. One small step at a time, Maria wrapped her arms around her knees and let out a quiet breath. She wasn't ready for big decisions, but she was ready for small steps. And maybe that was enough for now. Tomorrow, she would show up again. She would play again. She would keep moving, even if she didn't know where it would lead. For the first time in years, she felt like her life wasn't just something she watched happen. She felt part of it. She felt alive within it. And somewhere deep inside her, the quiet spark of music grew a little brighter.